What you're about to hear changes everything we thought we knew about Skinwalker Ranch. For years, Dr. Travis Taylor, a man with multiple doctorates in aerospace engineering, optical science, and physics, has led the scientific investigation at America's most mysterious property. He's worked on classified government projects. He's investigated advanced propulsion systems for the Department of Defense. He's someone who demands proof, who insists on repeatability, who approaches every anomaly with rigorous skepticism. But something has shifted. In recent statements and on-camera moments from The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Dr. Taylor has begun acknowledging something he spent years avoiding, something the data has forced him to accept. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't belief. This was evidence, cold and repeatable, pushing him toward a conclusion that even he finds disturbing. Within the scientific community, and among those who follow the investigation closely, the change in his language has been impossible to miss. He's no longer just documenting anomalies. He's no longer simply saying we need more data. He's acknowledging intelligence behind the phenomena, purpose, awareness, response. And for someone with his credentials, someone with everything to lose by making extraordinary claims, that acknowledgement represents a profound shift. Subscribe now, because what follows will challenge your understanding of what's possible at this 512-acre property in northeastern Utah. Let's establish exactly who Dr. Travis Taylor is, because without understanding his background, you can't fully appreciate the significance of what he's now saying. This isn't a paranormal enthusiast who finally found evidence for his beliefs. This isn't someone with a pre-existing agenda looking for validation. This is a scientist whose entire career has been built on skepticism and evidence-based analysis. Dr. Taylor holds a doctorate in optical science and engineering from the University of Alabama. He holds another doctorate in aerospace systems engineering. He has a master's degree in physics, another in astronomy, and another in mechanical and aerospace engineering. He's worked on advanced propulsion systems. He's contributed to missile defense programs. He's been involved in classified projects that required the highest security clearances. When History Channel brought him to Skinwalker Ranch, they needed someone who would push back against wild theories, someone who would demand scientific rigor, someone who would protect the integrity of the investigation even if it made for less dramatic television. And that's exactly what he did for years. He questioned everything. He insisted on controlled experiments. He looked for mundane explanations first: equipment malfunction, environmental factors, human error. He installed sophisticated monitoring equipment across the ranch, spectrum analyzers to detect electromagnetic frequencies, radiation detectors to measure energy signatures, high-speed cameras to capture phenomena too fast for the human eye, GPS sensors to track spatial anomalies. He approached every strange occurrence with the same skepticism he would apply to any scientific investigation. Watch the early seasons and you'll see him constantly pumping the brakes on speculation, suggesting conventional explanations, insisting on more data before drawing conclusions. So when someone like Travis Taylor, someone with everything to lose by making claims he can't back up, begins speaking more openly about encountering phenomena that challenge our understanding of physics, you have to ask yourself what exactly forced his hand. What data became so overwhelming that continuing to deny it would be intellectually dishonest? What patterns emerged that even the ultimate skeptic had to acknowledge? In the early seasons of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, strange things happened, but they were isolated incidents, individual anomalies that, taken one at a time, could be explained away or filed under needs more investigation. A UAP sighting here, an electromagnetic spike there, equipment failure, unusual radiation readings. Each incident by itself had possible explanations. But science isn't about individual events. It's about patterns. It's about seeing the same thing happen multiple times under controlled conditions. It's about ruling out coincidence and finding genuine correlations. And that's when things at Skinwalker Ranch got disturbing, because the team began documenting recurring anomalies that weren't just random weirdness. UAP sightings weren't random. They appeared in specific locations at predictable intervals. They showed up during certain types of experiments. They manifested in response to specific stimuli. Electromagnetic field spikes correlated with GPS failures. Not sometimes, consistently. When they detected unusual EMF readings, their GPS systems would show impossible coordinates, positions that placed them hundreds of feet from where they were actually standing. Radiation bursts occurred in conjunction with visual phenomena. They'd see something unusual in the sky, and simultaneously their radiation detectors would spike. Equipment didn't just fail randomly. It failed when they were investigating specific areas of the ranch. Certain locations triggered consistent patterns of malfunction. Cameras would shut off, batteries would drain, electronics would reset. What started as unexplained events became repeated repeatable phenomena. Data points aligned across time, location, and experimental conditions. The phenomena weren't just happening to them, they were happening in response to their investigations. When you drill in a certain area, radiation spikes. Every time. When you launch rockets towards certain coordinates, UAPs appear. When you use certain frequencies, equipment malfunctions, specific, predictable, repeatable patterns. Dr. Taylor couldn't ignore the correlation. When you see the same pattern emerge over and over, when you can predict outcomes based on inputs, when the relationship between action and response becomes statistically significant, you're no longer looking at coincidence. You're looking at a system with rules, a system that responds predictably to specific inputs. And that realization changed everything. There comes a moment in every scientific investigation when the data becomes undeniable. When you've exhausted every rational explanation, tested every mundane hypothesis, ruled out every conventional possibility. For Dr. Taylor and his team, that moment came during experiments where the readings exceeded not just their expectations but safe thresholds. They measured radiation levels that should not exist in that environment, not slightly elevated readings that might be explained by natural sources, massive spikes that had no conventional source, electromagnetic frequencies that don't match any known transmission, commercial, military, or natural, GPS coordinates shifting by hundreds of feet, while equipment remained completely stationary, energy signatures that violated our understanding of how physics should work in that space. Watch his reactions in recent seasons, the pauses before he speaks, the careful choice of words, the moments where he stops mid-sentence, processing what he's seeing, searching for a conventional explanation, and coming up empty. He doesn't say this is impossible. He says this shouldn't be happening. He doesn't say this violates the laws of physics. He says this is inconsistent with our current understanding. These distinctions matter. They're the words of a scientist who's seeing something that challenges conventional knowledge but who isn't ready to completely abandon the scientific framework, because what they were measuring shouldn't coexist. You can't have those radiation signatures without a source. You can't have those electromagnetic patterns without generation equipment. You can't have GPS anomalies of that magnitude without massive gravitational interference or sophisticated jamming. And yet there they were, documented, repeatable, undeniable, captured by multiple independent sensor systems. This wasn't one sensor giving a bad reading. They were seeing correlated anomalies across multiple sensor types. When the radiation spiked, the EMF detectors also showed unusual readings. When the GPS failed, they also saw visual phenomena, multiple independent systems detecting something at the same time. At this point, Skinwalker Ranch stopped behaving like a piece of land with unusual properties. It started behaving like a system with inputs and outputs, a system that responded to their actions, a system that seemed to follow rules, even if those rules didn't match anything in conventional physics, a system that, terrifyingly, seemed to be aware of what they were doing and responding to it. And this is where everything changes. In recent statements, Dr. Travis Taylor has made a fundamental shift in how he discusses the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch. It's subtle. If you're not paying close attention, you might miss it. But for those who've followed his journey, it's seismic. He no longer treats the phenomena as random environmental anomalies. He's not discussing unusual geological formations or atmospheric conditions. He no longer frames them as unexplained natural occurrences that science will eventually understand. Instead, Dr. Taylor now openly acknowledges that what they're dealing with exhibits signs of intelligence. Not consciousness necessarily, not sentience in the way we usually think about it, but intelligence, purpose, awareness, response. He talks about the phenomena responding to their experiments, not just happening during experiments, responding, as if whatever they're dealing with is aware of what they're doing and choosing how to react. He discusses patterns of behavior that suggest awareness, not just patterns in data, but patterns of behavior. That word choice is crucial. Rocks don't behave, energy doesn't behave, physical phenomena don't behave. Things with awareness, things with intelligence, things that can make choices, those things behave. He references reactions that appear deliberate, purposeful, as if whatever they're studying is trying to achieve specific outcomes. This is a massive departure from early seasons where every strange occurrence was met with, "We need more data," or "There must be a natural explanation." Now the data is the explanation, the patterns they've documented, the responses they've measured, the behaviors they've observed. That's what's explaining everything else. And if there's intelligence behind these phenomena, that means something is aware of their presence. Something knows they're there. Something is watching them investigate. And intelligence implies intent. If something is intelligent, if it's making choices about how to respond to their investigations, then it has reasons for those choices. It has purposes. It has goals. cycles, which means everything that's happened at Skinwalker Ranch might not be random. The equipment failures, the phenomena that appear and disappear, the patterns of activity they've documented, all of it might be intentional. But why here? Why this specific 512-acre property in northeastern Utah? The answer might lie in the geography itself. Skinwalker Ranch sits in a basin surrounded by mesas. Beneath the surface, ground-penetrating radar has revealed massive underground structures, cavities, tunnels, possibly even chambers that shouldn't exist in that geological formation. The ranch sits on what appears to be a unique convergence point, magnetic anomalies that don't match expected patterns, unusual mineral deposits that create natural waveguides for electromagnetic energy, geological features that might act as natural resonators or amplifiers, creating specific electromagnetic or gravitational properties. But here's what's truly unsettling. Similar phenomena have been reported at other locations around the world, other basins, other areas with unusual geology, other places with magnetic anomalies. But they're weaker, less consistent, less intense. Other sites show UAP activity, strange electromagnetic readings, but Skinwalker Ranch is different in both degree and kind. The concentration of activity is unprecedented. At other locations, you might see one type of phenomenon. At Skinwalker Ranch, you see all of it. UAPs, radiation spikes, electromagnetic anomalies, GPS failures, equipment malfunctions, physical effects on people and animals, all happening in the same location, sometimes simultaneously. The repeatability is disturbing. They can design experiments and predict with disturbing accuracy what's going to happen. It's as if Skinwalker Ranch isn't just a location where strange things happen. It's a hub, a focal point, a nexus. If other locations with similar phenomena are like small towns, Skinwalker Ranch is like a major metropolitan area. And that raises the most dangerous question yet. A hub for what? What kind of activity? What kind of intelligence? Serving what purpose? But investigating Skinwalker Ranch isn't just intellectually challenging, it's dangerous. Over the course of the investigation, team members have reported physical effects that can't be dismissed as coincidence. Burns with no apparent source, actual radiation burns that appear suddenly, sudden illness after exposure to certain areas, disorientation severe enough to require medical attention. Dr. Taylor himself has experienced health issues during investigations, headaches that appear suddenly when in certain areas, feelings of pressure or disorientation, physical symptoms that correlate with specific experimental activities. Other team members have been hospitalized. Some have developed symptoms that medical professionals struggle to explain, conditions that don't match known illnesses or injuries. And Dr. Taylor now openly acknowledges what he once downplayed. There are real safety concerns at Skinwalker Ranch. He talks about implementing new protocols, formal procedures for limiting exposure to certain areas, requirements for protective equipment, rules about how long team members can work in specific zones, mandatory medical monitoring. Because here's the terrifying implication. If the phenomena exhibit intelligence, and if that intelligence has demonstrated the ability to affect physical matter and biological systems, then studying it too closely might not just reveal answers, it might provoke a response. What happens when observation itself becomes a trigger? When your very presence, your equipment, your experiments provoke responses that can harm you. So why is Dr. Travis Taylor speaking more openly now? After years of careful language and measured responses, why this shift? The answer is simple. The evidence left no room for silence. When the data becomes overwhelming, when the patterns become undeniable, when the phenomena become too consistent to ignore, continuing to deflect becomes intellectually dishonest. Dr. Taylor has always balanced two competing forces: the scientific responsibility to report what you observe and the fear of being misinterpreted or sensationalized. For years, he erred on the side of caution. Better to say nothing than to say something that might be misunderstood. But there comes a point where staying silent does more harm than speaking up, where the integrity of the investigation demands transparency. The mounting evidence, season after season, experiment after experiment, has created a body of work that can no longer be explained away. They have the data, years of it, terabytes of measurements, observations under controlled conditions, repeated experiments with consistent results. At some point, we need more data stops being scientific caution and becomes avoidance. At some point, you have to acknowledge what the data is telling you. But here's what's really unsettling. If this is only what Dr. Dr. Taylor is willing to say publicly, on camera, in a format that will be broadcast to millions of people? What has he seen that he still can't talk about? What data exists that's even more disturbing? Because make no mistake, what he's saying publicly represents the minimum that intellectual honesty allows him to acknowledge. So what happens next? If Dr. Taylor's acknowledgement represents a turning point, what does that mean for the ongoing investigation? First, understand that the investigation is escalating. New protocols are being implemented. More sophisticated equipment is being deployed. The team is approaching the ranch with a level of seriousness that goes beyond scientific curiosity. Because here's the shift that's occurred. This is no longer about understanding the phenomena. It's about containment. Containment means you're dealing with something potentially dangerous, something that needs to be controlled, managed, kept from spreading or escalating. Dr. Taylor's shift in language reflects this. He's moved from curiosity-driven investigation to risk assessment mode. He talks about managing the phenomena rather than simply documenting it. When a scientist stops trying to reveal something and starts trying to contain it, that tells you everything about how dangerous they believe it to be. You don't contain things that are merely interesting. You contain things that pose risks. And here's another disturbing possibility. The ranch may not be trying to reveal its secrets. It may be testing boundaries, testing what the team will tolerate, testing how far it can push, testing whether they'll continue investigating despite the risks. If the phenomena are intelligent and purposeful, then this makes sense. You don't just passively allow yourself to be studied, you study back. Dr. Travis Taylor entered Skinwalker Ranch as a skeptic, a scientist determined to apply rigorous methodology to extraordinary claims, someone who would demand proof before accepting the impossible. And for years he maintained that skepticism. He pushed back, he questioned, he demanded repeatability. But now he's acknowledging intelligence behind the phenomena. He's talking about responses, patterns, and behaviors that suggest awareness. He's implementing safety protocols not for natural disasters, but for something that reacts to human presence. This isn't belief, this isn't faith, this isn't speculation, this is forced acknowledgement. Dr. Travis Taylor didn't want this conclusion. He didn't set out to prove the paranormal. He went to Skinwalker Ranch to debunk it, but the data wouldn't let him. The patterns wouldn't stop forming. The phenomena wouldn't stop responding. The evidence wouldn't stop accumulating, until he reached a point where continuing to deny it would be intellectually dishonest. So here's the final chilling thought. If the phenomenon at Skinwalker Ranch is intelligent, if it responds to investigation, if it exhibits patterns that suggest awareness, then it knows we're watching. It knows every experiment they run, every sensor they place, every measurement they take. It's aware of their presence, their activities, their attempts to understand it. And it always has, from the very first moment they set foot on that ranch, from the first sensor they installed, from the first experiment they conducted. It was aware, watching, waiting, which means that everything that's happened, every anomaly, every equipment failure, every injury, every phenomenon they've documented might not be random occurrence. It might all be intentional, chosen, deliberate responses from something that knows it's being studied and has decided how to react to that study. And that raises the most disturbing question of all. If it's been aware of them this entire time, if it's been choosing how to respond to their investigations, if everything they've experienced has been intentional, what is it trying to tell them? Or perhaps more terrifyingly, what is it trying to prevent them from discovering?
The morning started like any other on the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, cameras rolling, the crew preparing for another long day of experiments. But by noon, everything changed. Travis Taylor's van was found abandoned behind the mesa, its doors unlocked, and its equipment still running. What investigators claimed they discovered inside that van was so disturbing that the footage was locked away and never aired. Audio files, photographs, and something else. Something that shouldn't exist on Earth. Before we uncover the chilling truth of what was found inside, make sure you subscribe, because this might be the most disturbing discovery in the history of Skinwalker Ranch. It was just after sunrise when the producers first realized something was wrong. The crew gathered at the base camp as usual, the Utah air still cold enough to see their breath. Every vehicle was accounted for except one. Travis Taylor's van was missing. At first, no one panicked. Travis had a reputation for wandering off before dawn to calibrate sensors or chase a lead on his own. But as the hours stretched and radio calls went unanswered, that familiar scientific curiosity gave way to a rising unease. Around 9:20 a.m., Caleb spotted tire tracks leading off the access road, heading toward the back of the mesa, a restricted area where the radiation spikes had once nearly hospitalized Thomas Winterton. Brandon Fuel Fugle ordered a small team to check it out while cameras stayed rolling from a distance. When they crested the ridge, there it was. Travis's gray van, parked half-buried in the red dust, door slightly ajar, hazard lights still blinking faintly. Though the battery should have been long dead, the air around it felt wrong, heavy, metallic, humming just at the edge of hearing. Caleb called out twice before approaching, his boots crunching on the gravel. The smell hit him first, sharp and sterile, like burnt electronics mixed with something sweet, almost chemical. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, the key still in the ignition. A digital Geiger counter on the dashboard flickered erratically, jumping between normal background radiation and bursts that would have required a nuclear source. In the back, they found a setup that didn't belong on a reality show. Monitors bolted to the walls, wires running into the floor, dozens of notebooks filled with equations that didn't match any known experiment conducted for the series. Someone, likely Travis, had been living in that van, sleeping there, working there, documenting something off the books. A single camera mounted above the rear door was still recording, its red light blinking like an unblinking eye. Caleb radioed Brandon, his voice barely steady. "We found the van. You need to see this yourself." When Brandon and the crew arrived, they surrounded the vehicle in silence. The only sound was the faint clicking of the Geiger counter and the low hum beneath their feet, as if the mesa itself was listening. No one could explain the symbols scrawled in white chalk across the back window, a spiral surrounded by 3 intersecting lines, Travis's handwriting, and just below it, a message etched into the dust: "Don't open the case." When the crew finally entered Travis Taylor's van under Brandon Fugle's orders, they expected more of his scattered notes and research gear, not what they actually found. Wedged between the driver's seat and the passenger floorboard was a small black recorder, the kind used for field notes. The red light was still flashing, meaning it had been running for hours after Travis vanished. Caleb pressed play. At first, all they heard was static, a soft hiss that built into a rhythmic clicking, like Morse code, but irregular, organic. Then came the voice. It was Travis, low, deliberate, and strained. "It's responding. The pattern's changing every time I speak," he whispered. There was the sound of movement, a door opening, and then something else. A metallic groan, deep and resonant, vibrating through the van's speakers. The crew froze as the pitch shifted into a higher frequency, one that made their earpieces crackle and their stomachs twist. Eric Bard, the team's lead technologist, recognized the waveform on the recorder's display immediately. It wasn't random noise. It repeated every 47 seconds, identical intervals, layered with harmonics that no natural signal could produce. "That's not feedback," Eric said, his voice barely audible. "That's intelligent." Next to the recorder sat Travis's laptop, still open despite the drained battery. Its last active window showed an audio spectrum analysis. The waveform patterns were symmetrical, mirror images folding into each other, forming shapes that looked almost like symbols. The timestamps told a disturbing story. Travis had been recording the signals every night for the past 8 days, always at the same time, 3:07 a.m. The same hour the ranch's surveillance drones went blind, and the same hour orbs had been filmed hovering above the triangle. As the team continued searching, they found a folder of unmarked thumb drives taped under the dashboard. Each was labeled in Travis's handwriting: Respondent 1, Respondent 2, Phase 3, Transmission Attempt. When Eric loaded the first one into his tablet, it refused to open. Not corrupted, but encrypted with a custom code. The second drive did open, revealing another audio file that played without prompt. This one wasn't Travis speaking. It was a voice, distorted, mechanical, and layered, repeating his words from the first recording in reverse. Eric ripped his headphones off, his face pale. "That's his voice," he said, "but it's not him." The air inside the van grew heavy again, static building on the radios. Brandon ordered everyone out. As they backed away, the recorder on the dashboard clicked by itself, unprompted, and started playing one last line. Travis's voice, trembling and distant, whispered, "Stop listening." It's listening back. Once the immediate danger of the audio devices passed, Eric Bard noticed a stack of Polaroids pinned against the inside of the van's rear doors. Dozens of them, all developed, each marked with Travis Taylor's small, controlled handwriting along the white margins. The first few looked harmless enough. The mesa at night, shots of the triangle field, what appeared to be long exposure experiments capturing faint light streak. But the deeper the crew dug, the stranger the images became. One photo showed an outline in the dirt, a perfect spiral burned into the soil, surrounded by 6 equidistant depressions like claw marks pressed into stone. Another displayed symbols carved into the canyon rock, faintly glowing under UV light. But it was the third set that changed the atmosphere completely. The sequence began with a photo of Travis's reflection in the van window, his face pale, eyes hollow, holding a small flashlight. The next photo, taken seconds later, showed that same reflection, except now a second figure stood behind him. It was human in shape but wrong, stretched, distorted, its outline blurred as if caught mid-vibration. The final image in the series captured only the figure, standing directly beside the van, one hand flat against the glass. Underneath it, Travis had written, "He followed me here." When Caleb spread the photos across the hood, Brandon Fugel's face drained of color. Each picture was time-stamped between 3:05 and 3:10 a.m., the same hour the transmissions from the audio files had been recorded. The pattern wasn't coincidence. Whatever Travis was documenting, it was communicating through both sound and presence. But there was more. Several photos had faint reflections that didn't belong. When enhanced by Eric using spectral filters, glowing eyes appeared in the negative space. Not white, but red, faintly luminescent, almost infrared. Eric froze when he realized the reflections weren't coming from the camera's flash or the environment. They were internal light sources inside the van. Brandon ordered the rest of the images sealed, but one slipped through. An unnamed production assistant uploaded a scan online, and within hours, forums exploded with speculation. Users noticed something chilling buried in the pixels, a pattern of dots across the figure's chest, arranged exactly like the triangular coordinates of the ranch's magnetic hotspots. "That's not an image," Eric whispered, examining the original. "That's a map." When the lights in the command tent flickered minutes later, no one dared to speak. The connection between the photographs and the phenomenon had crossed from visual evidence into something else entirely, something that felt aware. When investigators finally cleared the back of Travis Taylor's van, they found 3 heavy metal containers wedged beneath a tarp, each sealed with industrial clamps and lined with radiation warning stickers. The air grew colder the closer they got to them, as if the van itself exhaled something sterile and metallic. The first case was labeled in Travis's familiar handwriting, "Gamma response, do not open." But curiosity outweighed caution. Against Brandon's order, Caleb unlatched one corner. The lid creaked open with a hiss. Inside lay shards of blackened material that shimmered faintly under the flashlight beam, fractured, irregular, and warm to the touch. Eric Bard swept a handheld meter over them, and it instantly spiked into the red. The fragments pulsed, faintly vibrating, as if responding to the proximity of the human bodies around them. It wasn't just radiation. The energy readings came in pulses, rhythmic and patterned, mimicking a frequency, almost a heartbeat. Travis had kept meticulous notes beside the case. His handwriting was hurried, desperate. One page read, "The fragments hum only near the mesa. When removed, they fall silent." Another line below it was scribbled so deeply into the paper that it tore, "Material reacts to sound. 18 kilohertz equals response. Feels alive." Inside the second case, they found smaller, smoother objects, coin-sized metallic discs coated with residue that shimmered in colors no one could name. When exposed to UV light, they refracted into impossible angles, bending illumination around themselves instead of reflecting it. The instruments malfunctioned just trying to record them. Then came the third case. It was heavier, colder, and unmarked except for one faint word carved into the lid, "Heart." When they cracked it open, the air inside shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. Resting inside was a cylindrical capsule made of an unknown alloy. The moment Eric lifted it, every electronic device within 10 feet shut down. Cameras froze. Radios screamed static. The capsule vibrated for exactly 3 seconds. Then, went still. Later analysis revealed that its mass didn't match its size. It weighed almost double what its volume should allow. Inside Travis's notes, one chilling passage explained why. "The capsule amplifies local field resonance," he wrote. "It doesn't contain power, it feeds on it." The crew backed out of the van in silence, their skin tingling, hearts pounding. The fragments, the discs, the capsule, none of it resembled any known human technology. And yet, Travis had been cataloging it carefully, as if studying something he already understood. As Brandon looked back toward the mesa looming in the distance, he muttered under his breath, "Whatever this is, he brought part of it back with him." The Geiger counter inside the van clicked twice more before going completely silent. Then, in that sudden stillness, every crew member felt the vibration again, deep beneath the ground, rising through their feet like the slow heartbeat of the desert itself. Hidden under the driver's seat, wrapped in a piece of torn tarp, was Travis Taylor's field journal. At first glance, it looked like every other research log he'd kept. Neat handwriting, timestamps, measurements, standard procedure. But as the pages turned, the writing shifted. The entries became erratic, fragmented, almost paranoid. The first strange note appeared 3 weeks before the van's discovery. "The mesa is not reflecting signals anymore. It's replying." Every few pages, a new pattern emerged. Strings of numbers, strange diagrams resembling constellations that didn't exist. One sketch depicted the mesa as a hollow pyramid, with tunnels converging beneath a sphere marked source scribbled next to it. "It hums louder when I whisper back." Then came the shift in tone. The sentences turned desperate, as though Travis wasn't documenting an experiment anymore. He was recording a conversation. "It knows I'm listening," one entry read. "The signal only stops when I stop thinking about it." Another, barely legible. "If you hear it too, it's already inside." The final 10 pages were torn and burned at the edges. Across the last full sheet, in thick black ink that bled through several layers, Travis had written the same sentence over and over. "Do not open the heart." Beneath it, faint impressions suggested something had been pressed into the paper. Circular indentations matching the size of the metal capsule found in the van. Brandon Fugel flipped through the pages in silence before finally saying, he wasn't writing notes anymore. He was confessing. That night, the production crew swore the journal itself emitted a low buzz whenever left unattended, a vibration so subtle it could have been imagination, but no one volunteered to keep it overnight. It was sealed in a lead case before sunrise. And as Caleb later admitted in a whispered interview, "I think Travis knew the van wasn't just storing data. It was containing something, and he was losing the fight to keep it inside." As investigators prepared to tow Travis Taylor's van off the ranch, Eric Bard noticed something odd about the floor. The metal beneath the rear mat gave off a faint echo, hollow where it should have been solid. Kneeling down, he pried at the edge with a multi-tool until the lining lifted, revealing a hidden seam. Beneath it was a small latch welded into the frame, disguised under layers of dust. With gloves on, Caleb forced it open, exposing a narrow compartment sealed with heat-resistant foil. Inside lay a single object, a cube roughly the size of a human fist, wrapped in what looked like aged burlap. When Eric unwrapped it, the van's radiation meter chirped to life again, not in random spikes, but steady, measured beats. The cube was matte black, cold to the touch, etched with patterns too precise to be carved by hand. They looked like circuitry, but the material wasn't metal. It seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The moment Eric lifted it, every camera in the van glitched. The footage stuttered for exactly 3 frames before freezing on an image that none of the crew ever forgot. A flicker of blue light radiating from the cube like veins of lightning. Travis's notes, found tucked inside the compartment beside it, were even more unsettling. Object activates near the mesa, syncs to seismic patterns every 23.2 seconds. One line read, possible transmitter or containment key. Another note, scribbled in smaller handwriting, said, "When I brought it back, the hum followed. It's not supposed to be here." They placed the cube on a containment tray, and immediately every compass within 50 feet rotated toward it, not north, but down, beneath the mesa. When Brandon saw the data feed spike, he stepped back. "That's not reading as radiation," Eric muttered. "It's directional energy. It's signaling something." Caleb, staring at the ground, whispered what no one else wanted to say. "Then something's signaling back." That night, the cube was transferred to a secured case and taken off the property. The truck carrying it made it only halfway to the lab before the GPS failed and the dash cams blacked out for nearly an hour. When the vehicle arrived at its destination, the cube was gone. No signs of forced entry, no damage, just an empty case and the faint smell of ozone. When Eric reviewed the footage frame by frame, the final image before the blackout showed a faint blue flash filling the truck's interior, the same pattern captured in Travis's van. He paused the feed, staring at the frozen frame for a long time before muttering, "It didn't disappear, it went home." Later that week, Brandon Fugel authorized Eric Bard to review the van's dash cam footage, a redundant security system Travis had installed months earlier without telling production. The files were damaged, corrupted by the same electromagnetic interference that plagued every experiment near the mesa. Yet one segment remained intact, a clip time-stamped 2 nights before the van was discovered. At first, the footage showed Travis pacing outside the van, agitated, running his hands through his hair, muttering into a handheld recorder. He appeared to be alone. Then, he stopped suddenly, glancing over his shoulder toward the mesa. The audio spiked with that same high-frequency pulse from the cube, a tone that distorted the entire feed. He shouted something, but the words were lost in static. When the sound cleared, his voice was hoarse, panicked. "It won't stop answering." Travis opened the van's rear doors and leaned inside, half hidden from view. For nearly 3 minutes, he stood motionless, staring into the dark interior as if something unseen was there. Then his body jerked violently, as though hit with a jolt of electricity. The cameras glitched for 6 full seconds, filling the screen with bursts of white and blue static. When the image returned, Travis was gone. The doors were closed. The footage jumped forward abruptly. An unexplained cut lasting exactly 6 minutes and 13 seconds. In that missing window, no data recorded, no sound captured. When the feed resumed, the van's headlights flickered once, then off. The last frame showed the reflection of the mesa in the windshield. For just a fraction of a second, something moved. Tall, thin, humanoid, its outline pulsing in sync with the tone still faintly echoing through the audio track. When Eric enhanced the frame, his hands shook. The figure wasn't standing in front of the van. It was standing inside it. Brandon ordered the footage locked away immediately, but before he shut the monitor off, Eric swore he saw something impossible. The figure's reflection tilting its head toward the camera and smiling. After the van was hauled away, Skinwalker Ranch fell silent in a way that unnerved even the most seasoned investigators. Equipment readings flattened. The electromagnetic bursts that once plagued the site vanished overnight. It was as if the land itself had gone still, holding its breath. But beneath that quiet lingered something heavier, a sense that whatever had been inside Travis Taylor's van wasn't gone. It was watching. For days, crew members reported faint vibrations under their boots, a steady pulse like a buried engine deep beneath the mesa. Drones flown over the site refused to stabilize, spinning violently before crashing in perfect symmetry around the same coordinates where the van had been found. When Eric cross-referenced the data, every crash aligned with the cube's pulse frequency, the one that vanished from the transport truck. "It's syncing with the land again," he whispered. "The signal's home." Then, during a late-night review session, Caleb noticed something strange in the surveillance feeds. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the hour stamped on Travis's secret recordings, the van's parking spot began to flicker faintly with thermal light. No visible source, just a shape, rectangular, glowing at the edges, as if the van was still parked there, but invisible to the naked eye. The next morning, Brandon ordered the team to stay clear of that area. Yet, curiosity won. Eric set up a sensor grid along the perimeter, recording low-frequency audio across a 12-hour cycle. What it captured made his stomach drop. Beneath the hum of static, a faint whisper looped at irregular intervals. It was Travis's voice, distorted but unmistakable, repeating the same phrase he'd once written in his journal: "Do not open the heart." By the time investigators retrieved the file, the whisper had changed, evolving, splitting into two overlapping tones, one human, one mechanical. When slowed down, the second voice formed coherent words: "Still here." Brandon sealed the area immediately. The official report listed equipment malfunction, but the crew knew better. Weeks later, the van reappeared in a storage hangar miles from the ranch, delivered without explanation, keys in the ignition, battery drained to zero. Every surface inside was coated with a thin layer of ash. There were no signs of forced entry, just a single message burned into the passenger door from the inside: "It's not over." Since then, no one has spoken publicly about what they found. Travis Taylor returned to filming but avoids any mention of that night. When asked directly, his response chills everyone who hears it. It wasn't evidence, it was communication, and whatever it was trying to say, it's not done talking.
Ground-penetrating radar found a massive metallic structure buried 200 feet beneath Skinwalker Ranch. It's 300 feet long with perfect geometric angles that geology cannot create. Material density suggests metal alloys that don't exist in surrounding rock. The structure has been there for 2,000 to 3,500 years based on sediment layers above it. Most shocking, it's still active, generating electromagnetic pulses every 47 seconds. Subscribe now, because what's buried under that Utah mesa predates known civilization and is operational ancient technology that scientists cannot explain. The discovery of the massive underground structure at Skinwalker Ranch wasn't a single eureka moment, but rather the culmination of months of systematic scientific investigation using progressively more sophisticated scanning technologies that built upon initial anomalous readings that the team couldn't explain through conventional geological or natural phenomena. The investigation began when Dr. Travis Taylor, the ranch's chief scientist with doctorates in optical science, aerospace systems engineering, and astronomy, was analyzing electromagnetic field data collected during routine monitoring of the property, and noticed consistent anomalies emanating from beneath the mesa rather than from the airspace above, where most of the ranch's documented phenomena typically manifest. The electromagnetic readings showed regular pulse patterns originating from underground that were too consistent, too structured, and too mathematically precise to be natural geological processes like piezoelectric effects from shifting rock layers under tectonic pressure or random mineral deposits creating magnetic interference. Travis proposed conducting ground-penetrating radar surveys to determine if there was a physical source for these electromagnetic emissions beneath the surface, and Brandon Fugel approved the substantial expenditure for commercial GPR equipment capable of imaging subsurface structures. The initial scans using standard archaeological ground-penetrating radar equipment could only penetrate approximately 30 feet deep, showing tantalizing hints of density anomalies that suggested something unusual was buried at greater depth, but not providing clear imaging of whatever was generating the deeper electromagnetic signatures. Recognizing the limitations of standard equipment, Brandon made the decision to bring in industrial-grade ground-penetrating radar typically used for mining surveys and deep geological assessments, equipment capable of imaging structures to depths exceeding 300 feet below the surface. These more powerful scans, conducted over a 2-week period covering the entire mesa area in a systematic grid pattern, revealed the full scope of the buried structure for the first time, showing a massive geometric object at a depth that placed it well below any known archaeological layers or historical human activity in the region. The data was so unexpected and contradicted known geology so dramatically that Travis initially suspected equipment malfunction or misinterpretation of natural geological features like lava tubes or mineral deposits. To verify the findings and eliminate the possibility of equipment error, Brandon contracted 3 separate independent geophysical survey companies to conduct their own scans of the same area using completely different technologies: gravimetric sensors measuring subtle gravitational field variations, seismic reflection surveys, and electromagnetic induction mapping. The technical specifications of the buried structure revealed through multiple independent scanning technologies provide unprecedented detail about its characteristics, dimensions, and properties that definitively distinguish it from any known natural geological formation or human construction in the archaeological record. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted over 6 months using multiple frequencies and scanning angles revealed an object buried approximately 200 to 250 feet beneath the mesa's surface, positioned at a depth that places it well below any known archaeological layers, historical human settlements, or mining operations that might have occurred in the region throughout documented history. The structure measures approximately 300 feet in length, 150 feet in width, and an estimated 40 feet in height based on radar returns and density analysis, making it roughly the size of a modern commercial building buried completely underground. What makes the object unmistakably artificial rather than natural is its geometric precision that violates every principle of how geological features form through natural processes. The radar images show straight edges forming perfect right angles, parallel surfaces maintaining absolutely consistent distances across hundreds of feet, and symmetrical proportions that natural rock formations simply cannot exhibit because geological features form through processes like erosion, sedimentation, volcanic activity, and tectonic forces that create irregular, organic, asymmetrical shapes. The underground anomaly at Skinwalker Ranch displays all the hallmarks of deliberate construction following a geometric design blueprint with mathematical precision. Material composition analysis using advanced gravimetric sensors that measure subtle variations in gravitational fields caused by different material densities revealed that the structure is significantly denser than the surrounding sandstone and limestone geology of the mesa. The density readings suggest the object contains metallic elements in concentrations far exceeding anything that would occur naturally in that specific geological context through mineral deposits or ore formations. Spectrographic analysis of electromagnetic signatures bouncing off the structure and returning to surface sensors indicates the presence of metals and possibly engineered metal alloys that don't match the iron oxide traces, copper deposits, and standard mineral content of the surrounding sedimentary rock layers. Most puzzling is the structure's orientation and positioning within the geological strata. It's not aligned with any natural geological features, fault lines, or sedimentary layers, but appears to have been deliberately placed at a specific location and precise depth, as if whoever or whatever constructed it wanted it hidden beneath a specific thickness of overburden but still at a recoverable depth rather than buried so deep it could never be accessed by future civilizations with drilling technology. The most unsettling and scientifically inexplicable aspect of the underground structure at Skinwalker Ranch isn't simply that it exists or appears artificially constructed, it's that the object is actively generating electromagnetic fields and energy emissions that prove it remains operational despite being buried for what geological analysis suggests could be thousands of years. This discovery transformed the investigation from an archaeological curiosity into a potential technological revelation that challenges fundamental assumptions about ancient civilizations and the limits of preserved functionality over geological timescales. Dr. Travis Taylor's electromagnetic monitoring equipment, positioned at multiple locations across the mesa and calibrated to detect extremely subtle field variations, detected pulses emanating from the buried structure at remarkably regular intervals averaging every 47 seconds. These pulses aren't random electromagnetic fluctuations or background noise from natural sources like lightning, solar radiation, or Earth's magnetosphere, but rather structured emissions with consistent frequency patterns, predictable amplitude variations, and directional characteristics that indicate deliberate signal generation rather than passive electromagnetic leakage from degrading metallic materials corroding underground. The energy signature operates primarily in frequencies between 1.6 and 2.2 gigahertz, a range that overlaps with modern satellite communications, radar systems, and wireless data transmission, but with modulation patterns that don't match any known human technology or natural electromagnetic phenomena documented in scientific literature. Most significantly, Travis discovered through months of careful correlation analysis that the underground electromagnetic emissions correspond precisely with anomalous phenomena observed above ground at Skinwalker Ranch. When the buried structure pulses with higher intensity electromagnetic bursts, the team simultaneously records increased UAP activity in the airspace directly above the mesa, sudden radiation spikes in specific areas of the property that trigger Geiger counters and dosimeters, and cascading equipment malfunctions affecting GPS navigation, radio communications, weapons, drone flight systems, and sensitive electronic instruments. The correlation between underground pulses and surface phenomena is too consistent, too precise, and too mathematically correlated to be coincidental, suggesting the buried structure is either causing the aerial phenomena through some unknown energy projection mechanism, communicating with whatever creates those phenomena through electromagnetic signaling, or serving as a beacon or homing device that attracts unknown entities or craft to this specific location. Analysis of the energy emission patterns reveals sophisticated characteristics that challenge explanation through any conventional framework. Determining the age of the buried structure at Skinwalker Ranch has proven extraordinarily challenging because conventional archaeological dating methods like radiocarbon dating of organic materials or thermoluminescence of fired ceramics require physical samples extracted from the object itself, which the team doesn't have access to without conducting full-scale excavation that involves drilling through 200 feet of sediment and rock. However, geological analysis of the sediment and rock layers positioned above the structure provides compelling indirect evidence about minimum age that has profound and disturbing implications for the timeline of advanced technological civilization in North America. Geological core samples extracted from multiple locations across the mesa using specialized drilling equipment show undisturbed sedimentary layers extending continuously from the current ground surface down to the depth where the buried structure is located. These layers represent hundreds or potentially thousands of years of continuous natural deposition created through wind erosion carrying dust and particles, seasonal water flow depositing silt and minerals, organic decomposition from plants and animals creating soil overburden, and gradual accumulation of volcanic ash from distant eruptions settling across the landscape over centuries. The critical scientific observation that eliminates recent human burial as an explanation is that none of these sedimentary layers show any evidence of disturbance, excavation, or backfilling that would necessarily occur if humans had dug a massive hole measuring 300 feet long and 150 feet wide, lowered or constructed a building-sized object into that excavation, and then refilled the hole with soil and rock. If the structure had been placed underground at any point in recent historical or even prehistoric human history, the geological record would show clear disruption signatures in the sediment layers, mixed soil horizons, disturbed stratification, tool marks, compaction differences between original geology and backfilled material. The complete absence of such disturbance indicators in the core samples suggests the structure was already in its current position before the overlying sediment began accumulating naturally through geological processes operating over extended timescales. Geological dating of the sediment layers directly above the structure using optically stimulated luminescence, a technique that measures when mineral grains were last exposed to sunlight before being buried, indicates the overburden has been accumulating for approximately 2,000 to 3,500 years, meaning the structure must have been in place before that accumulation period began. This timeline predates any known advanced civilization in North America capable of creating sophisticated geometric construction at this scale, with apparent metallic composition and ongoing electromagnetic functionality. Determining the actual purpose and function of the buried structure at Skinwalker Ranch requires analyzing the energy patterns, emission characteristics, and behavioral responses documented through years of monitoring, leading investigators to several competing theories about what this ancient technology was designed to accomplish and whether it's still performing its original mission after thousands of years underground. Dr. Travis Taylor's analysis of the electromagnetic emissions provides the most compelling clues about functional purpose based on the signature characteristics of the pulses and their correlation with external phenomena. The regular pulsing electromagnetic fields operating in gigahertz frequency ranges closely match the operational patterns of modern radar systems, long-range communications arrays, or sophisticated sensor networks designed to detect and track objects or phenomena across vast distances. The fact that emissions operate on precise mathematical intervals rather than random or chaotic patterns suggests deliberate engineering for a specific functional purpose rather than accidental byproduct of material degradation or geological processes. Travis's leading theory proposes the structure functions as an ancient monitoring station that has been passively observing Earth, specific celestial phenomena, or dimensional boundaries from for millennia, automatically collecting data through its sensor systems and potentially transmitting compiled information to unknown receivers through the electromagnetic pulses detected by surface equipment. The emissions correlation with astronomical cycles provides supporting evidence for this monitoring station hypothesis. The structure's energy output varies in predictable patterns aligned with Earth's 24-hour rotation, shows amplitude changes corresponding to lunar orbital phases, and exhibits frequency modulations that track solar activity cycles, including sunspot formation and coronal mass ejections. This astronomical synchronization suggests whatever technology exists underground remains actively tracking planetary dynamics and celestial mechanics, maintaining operational alignment with cosmic rhythms despite being buried beneath hundreds of feet of accumulated sediment. Alternative functional theories proposed by team members and outside experts include power generation or energy collection capabilities, with the structure possibly serving as a geothermal energy harvesting facility that taps into Earth's internal heat, an electromagnetic field collection system that draws power from the planet's magnetosphere, or an exotic energy conversion technology that operates on principles beyond current scientific understanding. The consistent kilowatt range power output, detected through surface measurements over extended monitoring periods without any apparent fuel source or external power input, suggests either an incredibly efficient internal power generation system or environmental energy harvesting that has operated continuously for thousands of years without maintenance or refueling. Within hours of Brandon Fugal making public announcements about the underground structure discovered at Skinwalker Ranch during a scientific conference presentation, federal government agencies launched a coordinated and aggressive response clearly designed to suppress information, control access to the discovery site, and potentially prosecute Brandon and his team for violating national security restrictions that appeared to have been retroactively applied to cover this specific situation. The speed and intensity of the government's reaction strongly suggested they were already monitoring the Skinwalker Ranch investigation and had contingency plans ready to execute immediately if Brandon went public with findings about the buried structure. Department of Defense officials contacted Brandon directly by phone before he had even departed the conference venue where he made his announcement, demanding he immediately cease all public discussion, turn over all scan data and analysis results to federal custody, and halt any plans for excavation or further investigation of the underground anomaly. The officials cited national security concerns and invoked provisions of federal law allowing classification of discoveries on private property if they relate to technologies, materials, or information deemed relevant to defense interests or potential threats to national security. Brandon's legal team was simultaneously served with formal notices, warning that any further public disclosure of technical information about the underground structure could result in prosecution under espionage statutes, typically reserved for cases involving disclosure of classified weapon systems or intelligence operations. Pentagon lawyers argued in these legal notices that the electromagnetic signatures, potential advanced materials, and unknown technology represented by the buried structure automatically fell under government jurisdiction for mandatory national security review, regardless of whether the technology originated from human or non-human sources, and regardless of the fact that it was discovered on private property legally owned by Brandon Fugal. Most aggressive and revealing was the government's immediate attempt to acquire Skinwalker Ranch itself through purchase or legal seizure. Federal officials contacted Brandon within days of his announcement with offers to purchase the property at substantially above market value, framing the acquisition as a generous opportunity that would allow him to avoid potential legal complications, financial penalties, and criminal prosecution that might result from continued private ownership and investigation of a site now deemed relevant to national security. When Brandon firmly refused to sell despite increasingly generous financial offers, the tone of government communications shifted dramatically to threats of eminent domain proceedings where federal authorities could forcibly acquire the property by claiming national security necessity, justified overriding private property rights. Dr. Travis Taylor's comprehensive scientific analysis of the underground structure at Skinwalker Ranch represents the most detailed technical examination of potentially non-human or ancient advanced technology ever conducted by a credentialed scientist willing to stake his professional reputation on findings that mainstream academia refuses to acknowledge or seriously consider. Travis holds multiple advanced degrees, including doctorates in optical science and engineering, aerospace systems engineering, and astronomy, giving him unique multidisciplinary qualifications to analyze the complex technical aspects of electromagnetic emissions, material science, structural engineering, and astronomical correlations that this discovery encompasses. His technical breakdown addresses three fundamental questions that define the significance of this find. What materials comprise the structure based on indirect analysis through scanning technologies? What functional purpose does it serve based on its energy emissions and behavioral patterns? And who or what entity possessed the technological capability to construct such a system and bury it at this location thousands of years ago? Material composition analysis based on electromagnetic induction responses, gravimetric measurements, and radar return characteristics indicates the structure contains metallic elements with density and conductivity properties, suggesting titanium-based alloys, stainless steel compositions, or possibly engineered materials not found in Earth's natural geological processes. The electromagnetic reflectivity patterns captured by ground-penetrating radar show the structure has a layered construction architecture with different materials at various depths and positions within the object. Similar to how modern engineered structures use different materials for different functional purposes: structural support, electromagnetic shielding, thermal management, equipment housing, rather than being carved from solid uniform rock or cast from single composition metal. Travis's analysis of the energy emission characteristics provides the most compelling evidence about functional purpose and ongoing operational status. The regular electromagnetic pulsing at 47-second intervals operating in gigahertz frequency bands matches signature patterns associated with radar systems designed for long-range detection, communications arrays transmitting data across vast distances, or sensor networks collecting and processing environmental information. The modulation patterns within these pulses show characteristics suggesting encoded information rather than simple carrier waves, implying the structure may be actively transmitting data about observations, measurements, or detected phenomena to receivers at unknown locations. Most intriguing is Travis's documentation of how the underground emissions synchronize with astronomical phenomena, including Earth's rotation creating 12-hour cyclical patterns, lunar phases causing predictable amplitude variations, and solar activity triggering frequency modulations. Brandon Fugel's decision to excavate despite government warnings required months of preparation, specialized drilling equipment capable of reaching 300+ feet, international teams of scientists and engineers, comprehensive safety protocols, and armed security to prevent federal interference. The strategy called for phased approach, preliminary test drilling at the structure's edge, remote sensing through drill holes, then controlled access shaft if safe. But as drill bits approached within 50 feet of the structure's surface, everything went wrong. Electromagnetic detectors registered massive energy spikes exceeding years of monitoring data. Equipment failed catastrophically. GPS lost satellite lock. Radios filled with static and strange tones. Cameras recorded distorted images. Most alarming were immediate health effects. Crew members experienced sudden headaches, nausea, disorientation, and nosebleeds attributed to radiation exposure or electromagnetic field interaction. Bryant Arnold's warnings about the structure defending itself proved accurate. The operation was immediately suspended. Some team members now refuse to participate in any further excavation attempts, convinced disturbing the technology triggers protective responses. If confirmed through excavation, this discovery rewrites everything. Proof of advanced civilization in North America thousands of years before mainstream archaeology acknowledges. Evidence of non-human intelligence on Earth in the distant past. The possibility human development isn't linear but cyclical. Advanced civilizations rising and falling throughout prehistory. This technology at Skinwalker Ranch could rewrite textbooks about human origins and our place in the universe. The truth buried beneath Utah desert is about to expose that we're not the first advanced civilization on this planet. History as we know it is wrong. Footage from Skinwalker Ranch security cameras documents Dr. Travis Taylor's physical deterioration across 5 seasons, 3 hospitalizations for radiation exposure, weight loss, personality changes, and the moment he collapsed during an experiment. Subscribe now because what cameras captured explains why Travis walked away from the most important investigation of his career. His doctors confirmed radiation poisoning exceeding nuclear worker limits. His family gave an ultimatum: quit or lose them. A classified Pentagon briefing revealed government knew about health risks for decades. The final experiment disrupted his heart rhythm, proving continuation could be fatal. This is why he left. When Dr. Travis Taylor appeared in Season 5 episodes of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Viewers familiar with his energetic scientific enthusiasm noticed something had fundamentally changed about the astrophysicist who served as chief scientist since Season 1. Production footage reviewed by investigators and media outlets reveals physical deterioration that became progressively apparent across Season 5 filming, despite editors' attempts to minimize visible decline through careful shot selection and strategic editing. Early Season 1 episodes show Travis as robust and energetic, constantly moving between experiment locations, eagerly discussing theoretical frameworks, displaying boundless enthusiasm characteristic of someone discovering genuinely anomalous phenomena worthy of serious scientific investigation. By contrast, Season 5 footage shows noticeably thinner, Travis moving more slowly between locations, frequently pausing during conversations as if struggling to maintain concentration, exhibiting visible fatigue during investigations that previously energized him, and displaying physical mannerisms suggesting chronic pain including frequent grimacing, careful movement patterns protecting specific body areas, and visible discomfort during activities requiring extended standing or physical exertion. Behind-the-scenes footage never broadcast reveals even more concerning details, including Travis requiring extended breaks between filming segments, production crew expressing concern about his appearance, and multiple instances where Travis requested sitting down during investigations he would previously have conducted while standing and moving throughout areas. Medical experts who reviewed selected footage noted Travis displayed classic signs of someone experiencing chronic radiation exposure effects, including visible weight loss, suggesting metabolic disruption, skin changes including unusual pigmentation patterns, and what appeared to be radiation burns in various healing stages, hair thinning consistent with follicle damage from ionizing radiation exposure, and movement patterns suggesting peripheral neuropathy causing pain or numbness in extremities. The most disturbing aspect of reviewing this footage chronologically involves watching a brilliant scientist who began the investigation, healthy, skeptical, and scientifically rigorous, gradually transform into someone who appeared physically compromised, emotionally exhausted, and according to those close to production, privately questioning whether continuing the investigation justified the mounting personal health costs he was paying. Colleagues who worked with Travis across multiple seasons later stated they watched him change from someone who bounded up the mesa with equipment to someone who struggled with the climb. Across 5 seasons of filming at Skinwalker Ranch, Dr. Travis Taylor required emergency medical treatment and hospitalization on 3 separate occasions, following experiments that exposed him to dangerous radiation levels or triggered acute medical emergencies that production staff and fellow investigators witnessed in real time. The first hospitalization occurred during Season 2 following a high-energy experiment on the mesa where the team was conducting electromagnetic pulse tests near the location where ground-penetrating radar had detected the massive underground metallic structure. Travis was operating equipment when he suddenly experienced what he described as the worst headache of his life, intense pressure inside his skull that felt like his head would explode, followed by uncontrollable nosebleed and temporary vision disturbances, including blind spots and inability to focus on objects. Emergency room physicians who examined Travis documented dangerously elevated intracranial pressure, the pressure of cerebrospinal fluid surrounding brain and spinal cord, with measurements typically seen only in patients with brain tumors, severe head trauma, or acute infections. Comprehensive CT scans and MRI imaging found no tumors, no bleeding, no structural abnormalities that would explain the sudden pressure spike, leaving medical professionals unable to provide explanation for what caused this acute medical emergency. Blood work revealed Travis had been exposed to significant ionizing radiation during the experiment based on cellular damage markers and biomarker patterns, though investigators could not identify the radiation source or explain how exposure occurred. The second hospitalization happened during Season 3 when the team was conducting drilling operations, attempting to reach the underground structure. Travis suddenly experienced severe vertigo, described as the entire environment spinning violently, followed by uncontrollable vomiting and complete loss of consciousness that required team members to physically carry him off the mesa because he couldn't stand or walk. Hospital neurological examination and emergency brain MRI revealed temporary inflammation and swelling in specific brain regions associated with electromagnetic sensitivity and vestibular function controlling balance and spatial orientation. Neurologists documented that the inflammation pattern was consistent with exposure to extremely powerful electromagnetic fields, but couldn't identify environmental sources that would produce fields strong enough to cause this level of acute brain tissue response. The third hospitalization occurred during Season 4, when the team conducted a 1.6 gigahertz frequency generation experiment, attempting to stimulate response from the underground structure. Travis experienced sudden severe chest pain, irregular heartbeat, and breathing difficulty. Following Dr. Travis Taylor's third hospitalization and increasingly frequent episodes of unexplained medical symptoms occurring between filming sessions, his personal physicians conducted comprehensive medical evaluations, including specialized testing protocols designed to detect radiation exposure effects and assess cumulative damage from repeated exposure to ionizing radiation across multiple years. Blood work revealed alarming patterns, including significantly depressed white blood cell counts indicating bone marrow suppression, elevated liver enzymes suggesting organ stress from processing radiation-damaged cellular material, and unusual concentrations of specific biomarkers that medical literature associates with chronic radiation exposure, rather than acute single-exposure incidents. Bone marrow biopsy performed to investigate the white blood cell suppression revealed cellular damage patterns that hematologists confirmed were consistent with ionizing radiation exposure, causing damage to stem cells responsible for blood cell production. Most concerning to Travis's medical team, the damage appeared cumulative rather than acute, suggesting repeated exposure over extended time frames had created progressive deterioration of bone marrow function that could potentially lead to more serious hematological conditions, including increased cancer risk, immune system dysfunction, and potentially life-threatening complications if exposure continued. Additional specialized testing measured chromosomal damage in Travis's cells using techniques that detect radiation-induced breaks and aberrations in DNA structure. Results showed significantly elevated levels of chromosomal damage compared to normal population baselines, with damage patterns that radiation biologists confirmed were characteristic of exposure to mixed radiation fields, including both electromagnetic radiation and potentially particle radiation from unknown sources. Travis's physicians provided him with explicit medical advice that continuing to work in environments with elevated radiation levels posed serious long-term health risks, including substantially increased cancer probability, accelerated aging of multiple organ systems, potential permanent immune system compromise, and possibility of acute life-threatening events if he experienced another severe exposure incident. The physicians documented that Travis's cumulative radiation exposure across 5 seasons of Skinwalker Ranch investigation had already exceeded recommended lifetime limits for occupational radiation workers in nuclear facilities, and continuing exposure could push him into ranges associated with deterministic health effects that occur with certainty rather than probability once exposure thresholds are crossed. Travis was advised in unambiguous medical terms that he needed to either cease working at locations with elevated radiation or accept that he was making a conscious choice to sacrifice long-term health for short-term investigative goals. Behind the public-facing professional image of Dr. Travis Taylor as enthusiastic scientist pursuing groundbreaking investigation at Skinwalker Ranch, his immediate family was watching someone they loved deteriorate physically and psychologically under pressures they felt powerless to stop. Travis's wife, whose identity he has protected by never naming publicly in interviews or on the show, witnessed her husband's transformation from healthy scientist, excited about investigating genuine anomalies, into someone experiencing chronic health problems, frequent medical emergencies, and psychological effects that changed his personality and behavior at home. She watched him lose significant weight despite eating normally, observed him experiencing chronic pain that required increasingly strong pain medication, noticed his hair thinning and skin developing unusual discoloration patterns, and became alarmed when he began having nightmares so severe he would wake up screaming without memory of what he dreamed. His children, who had initially thought their father's work on a television show about mysterious phenomena was exciting and made him seem cool to their friends, began expressing concerns about why Daddy kept going to the hospital, why he looked tired all the time, and why he seemed different when he came home from filming trips. According to sources close to the family, Travis's wife reached a breaking point during season 4, following his third hospitalization, when she realized the pattern was escalating rather than improving, and that each subsequent medical emergency seemed more severe than the previous one. She gave Travis an ultimatum that forced him to choose between continuing his work at Skinwalker Ranch and maintaining his marriage and relationship with his children. The ultimatum was delivered in unambiguous terms: either quit the show and stop exposing yourself to whatever is causing these medical emergencies, or accept that the family cannot continue living with the constant fear that the next phone call will be hospital staff informing them you've had another medical crisis or worse. She explained that the children were developing anxiety about him leaving for filming trips because they feared he wouldn't come back, that she couldn't sleep during filming periods because she was terrified of receiving emergency calls, and that the psychological toll on the entire family of watching him deteriorate was unsustainable regardless of how important he believed the scientific investigation to be. Travis faced an impossible choice between pursuing the most scientifically significant investigation of his career and maintaining the family relationships that gave his life meaning beyond professional accomplishment. During Season 4 filming, Dr. Travis Taylor participated in a classified briefing with Department of Defense officials and Pentagon representatives who had maintained ongoing interest in Skinwalker Ranch phenomena since the 1990s when the property was owned by Robert Bigelow and investigated under the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. This classified briefing, which Travis has obliquely referenced in interviews without providing details due to non-disclosure agreements, apparently provided him with historical context about government knowledge of the ranch that fundamentally changed his understanding of what he was investigating and the risks he was accepting by continuing the work. According to sources familiar with the briefing content, Pentagon officials shared classified data about health effects experienced by previous investigators who had worked at the ranch during the Bigelow ownership period under government contract. This historical health data revealed that Travis's medical emergencies and radiation exposure were not unique anomalies, but rather part of a documented pattern affecting multiple investigators who had spent extended time conducting experiments at the ranch. The classified files apparently contained medical records showing that several previous investigators had experienced similar symptom patterns, including unexplained radiation exposure, acute medical emergencies during experiments, progressive health deterioration over time, and in at least one case, permanent health damage requiring the investigator to end their career in physics and accept disability status. Most disturbing to Travis, the briefing apparently revealed that government officials had known about these health risks for decades but had not warned current investigators about the documented pattern because doing so would require acknowledging classified information about previous government investigation of the property. The briefing also apparently provided Travis with technical data about the underground structure that government analysts had collected in the 1990s, showing radiation emission patterns and electromagnetic field characteristics that explained why investigators working directly above or in proximity to the structure experienced acute health effects. Travis reportedly pressed the Pentagon officials about why they had allowed current investigation to proceed without warning about known health risks, and received responses suggesting that the potential scientific and national security value of the investigation outweighed concerns about individual investigator health, particularly since participation was voluntary and investigators had signed comprehensive liability waivers. This revelation that government had knowingly allowed him to expose himself to documented health hazards apparently contributed significantly to Travis's decision to walk away. Production footage that never made it into broadcast episodes of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch documents some of Dr. Travis Taylor's most severe medical incidents and psychological episodes that network executives and production company leadership determined were too disturbing for television broadcast, or would raise questions about investigator safety that could expose the production to liability concerns. One particular incident captured on multiple camera angles during Season 3 filming shows Travis conducting an experiment near the triangle area of the property when he suddenly stopped moving, stood completely still for approximately 15 seconds with what production staff described as a blank expression, and then collapsed to the ground, losing consciousness. The footage shows team members including Brandon Fugel and Eric Bard rushing to Travis's position, attempting to revive him by calling his name and checking vital signs, and appearing genuinely frightened by his unresponsive state. Audio captured by boom microphones records someone saying, "Call an ambulance," and another voice saying, "His pulse is really weak." Travis regained consciousness after approximately 30 seconds and appeared disoriented, asking where he was and initially not recognizing the people surrounding him. This footage was deemed too disturbing for broadcast because it would raise obvious questions about whether continuing investigation was worth risking scientists' lives. Additional unaired footage documents Travis experiencing what appear to be psychological effects during and after certain experiments, including moments where his speech patterns changed, His typical scientific vocabulary was replaced with disjointed statements that didn't follow logical progression, and his affect became flat and emotionless in ways completely inconsistent with his normal energetic personality. In one particularly disturbing sequence that sources close to production say was immediately flagged by editors as unusable for broadcast, Travis is conducting an electromagnetic experiment when he begins speaking in what sounds like a different voice with different vocal characteristics and cadence patterns, saying things that don't relate to the experiment and that he later claimed to have no memory of saying. Production crew members visible in the background of this footage appear visibly uncomfortable and confused, with at least one person backing away from Travis and another making a gesture that appears to be crossing themselves as if witnessing something spiritually disturbing. When Travis returned to normal consciousness and personality, he asked what had happened and appeared genuinely disturbed when crew members attempted to describe what they had witnessed. Network executives reportedly viewed this footage and immediately determined it could never be broadcast. Individuals who worked closely with Dr. Travis Taylor across multiple seasons of Skinwalker Ranch filming noticed progressive personality changes that extended beyond simple fatigue or stress from demanding production schedules, and instead suggested something more fundamental was affecting his psychological state and cognitive function. Early seasons showed Travis as consistently upbeat, enthusiastic about every experiment regardless of outcome, quick with jokes and humor even during long filming days, and maintaining genuine scientific curiosity and open-mindedness about anomalous data, even when it contradicted his initial hypotheses. By season 4, and especially season 5, colleagues noticed Travis had become notably more serious, sometimes going hours without joking or displaying his characteristic humor, appearing withdrawn during breaks between filming when he would previously socialize with team members, and displaying occasional emotional volatility, including moments of irritation or frustration over minor issues that he would previously have handled with patience and good humor. Eric Bard, who worked closely with Travis on numerous experiments, later commented in interviews that watching Travis's personality change across seasons was concerning, and that there were moments when Travis didn't seem like Travis, describing instances where the brilliant scientist he knew seemed absent and replaced by someone going through the motions without the passion and intellectual engagement that had characterized his earlier work. Dragon, the ranch security chief who interacted with Travis regularly, noted in off-camera comments to production staff that Travis seemed increasingly haunted as seasons progressed, using that specific word to describe someone who appeared to be carrying psychological weight beyond normal job stress. Thomas Winterton, the ranch superintendent who spent extensive time with Travis during investigations, observed that Travis became notably more cautious and even fearful during certain experiments in later seasons, sometimes expressing reluctance to proceed with planned activities or suggesting modifications to keep team members at safer distances from phenomena, representing a significant change from his earlier willingness to personally expose himself to potential risks in pursuit of data. Most concerning to several colleagues was Travis's increasingly frequent mention of dreams and nightmares involving the ranch, with Travis occasionally describing in disturbing detail dreams where he was trapped underground or being watched by something he couldn't see. These dream descriptions began appearing more frequently in Travis's casual conversation during season 4, and became more intense and more frequently mentioned during season 5, suggesting to those who knew him well that something about the ranch was penetrating his subconscious. Dr. Travis Taylor's decision to walk away from Skinwalker Ranch crystallized during a specific experiment conducted near the end of season 5, filming that produced effects severe enough to convince him that continuing the investigation would require accepting risks he was no longer willing to take, given his family situation and mounting health concerns. The experiment involved generating high-energy electromagnetic pulses directed toward the mesa area where the underground structure has been detected, using equipment capable of producing significantly more power than previous experiments in an attempt to stimulate measurable response from whatever generates the ranch's anomalous phenomena. Travis was operating the pulse generator and monitoring instrumentation when the equipment suddenly surged beyond programmed parameters, producing energy levels substantially higher than intended and creating electromagnetic fields strong enough to cause visible electrical arcing in the surrounding air. In that moment, Travis experienced what he later described as the most intense physical sensation of his entire time at the ranch, a feeling of being simultaneously frozen in place and pulled toward the ground by forces he couldn't see, combined with sudden overwhelming nausea and a sensation he described as feeling like his DNA was being pulled apart at the molecular level. The experience lasted lasted approximately 10 to 15 seconds before the equipment automatically shut down due to safety protocols. But Travis immediately knew something was seriously wrong because he could feel his heart beating irregularly, and his vision had developed strange distortions where straight lines appeared curved and colors seemed oversaturated and unnatural. Team members present reported that Travis looked like he'd seen a ghost, with his face pale and expression displaying genuine fear rather than the scientific curiosity that usually characterized his reactions to anomalous events. Travis requested that filming stop and told Brandon Fugel privately that he needed to end the investigation day immediately and seek medical evaluation. Hospital examination revealed Travis's heart rhythm had been disrupted into an arrhythmia pattern that cardiologists confirmed could have progressed to life-threatening cardiac arrest if it had continued. The cardiac arrhythmia appeared to have been triggered by the intense electromagnetic pulse exposure during the experiment, representing a direct causal link between ranch phenomena and potentially fatal medical emergency. This incident, coming after years of accumulated smaller incidents and mounting pressure from family, apparently represented the final straw that convinced Travis he needed to step away from regular investigation participation before the next incident killed him. Following his departure, Travis focused on health recovery and family. Medical monitoring showed gradual improvement in white blood cell counts and liver enzymes, though doctors warned chromosomal damage and increased cancer risk remain permanent consequences. Travis states publicly the ranch represents the most significant scientific anomaly of his career, but acknowledges the personal cost was higher than I understood. He occasionally consults remotely without physical ranch presence. His relationship with Brandon Fugel remains positive. Travis believes investigation must continue because phenomena are real and important, but future investigators need better safety protocols and transparent warnings about documented health risks. Brandon Fugel has never evacuated Skinwalker Ranch. Through 5 seasons of aerial phenomenon, underground discoveries, crew hospitalizations, and instrument readings that dismantled every conventional explanation his scientific team applied to them, the investigation kept moving, until the drilling operation reached something that responded, not resisted, responded, and Brandon Fugel made a decision that nobody in the investigation's history has ever made before. Subscribe and stay until the very end, because what responded to that drill changed everything. Brandon Fugel's ownership of Skinwalker Ranch has been defined by a single operational commitment that has distinguished his investigation from every prior program that engaged seriously with the property: the commitment to continuation. Where the Sherman family eventually reached the limit of what sustained exposure to the ranch's phenomenon could ask of a family trying to maintain an ordinary life, and sold. Where the NIDS program eventually exhausted the resources and the institutional patience that Robert Bigelow's private funding could sustain and wound down. Where the AAWSAP initiative eventually reached the point at which the classified research program's findings had produced a body of evidence that the government determined required management rather than continued investigation, and discontinued. Fugel kept going. The investigation he built around the property was designed specifically to outlast the forces that had stopped every prior program: the financial pressure, the institutional resistance, the personal toll, and the specific quality of sustained anomalous exposure that the ranch produces in the people who spend serious time on it. The monitoring infrastructure he installed runs continuously. The scientific team he assembled has the professional credentials to withstand the institutional skepticism that prior programs encountered. The broadcast format he chose gives the investigation a public accountability that private programs never had. Every design decision was oriented toward the same outcome, keeping the investigation moving regardless of what the ranch produced. That commitment has been tested across 5 seasons. The aerial phenomenon that defies every aerodynamic principle, the investigation's aerospace credentialed team applies to it. The underground structures whose geometric consistency no geological model accounts for. The crew members whose medical evacuations documented physical effects that attending physicians could not attribute to any known environmental cause. The instrument readings whose values Travis Taylor has been choosing every public word about with the specific care of a physicist who knows what his data is showing and understands the implications of stating it plainly. Through all of it, the investigation kept moving. The evacuation that this video documents is the first time in 5 seasons of investigation that the decision to stop, not pause, not suspend a session, but evacuate, was made. What produced that decision is what the drilling operation reached, and what the drilling operation reached responded to being reached in a way that made evacuation the only responsible choice. The Skinwalker Ranch drilling operation is the investigation's most direct attempt to physically access the underground formation that the sonar and ground-penetrating radar work of the middle seasons established as the property's most significant and most anomalous feature. The sonar returns from beneath the mesa that produced the investigation's first clear picture of the underground environment, identified significant structured voids at depths whose geometry was inconsistent with natural cave formation, too consistent in their proportions, too regular in their arrangement, and too specifically located at positions corresponding to the surface zones of maximum electromagnetic anomaly to be accounted for by the natural dissolution processes that produce cave systems in comparable geological environments. The drilling operation was designed to close the distance between the investigation's instrument-based knowledge of the underground formation and the physical reality of what the instruments had been mapping. The approach methodology developed across the operation's prior attempts, the lateral entry angles that avoided the direct vertical descents whose resistance events had terminated earlier drilling efforts, the geological assessments that identified the formation boundary zones where penetration was most viable, and the instrument monitoring that tracked the formation's response to the drilling in real time, had produced progressively more successful approaches to the underground structures with each season's operational iteration. The resistance that the formation had produced in response to prior drilling attempts had been the most consistent evidence that whatever was underground was not indifferent to the investigation above it. Equipment failures at specific depths, whose mechanical analysis produced no conventional explanation, flooding events that filled bore holes precisely when the drilling reached the depth boundaries of the most significant underground features, electromagnetic interference that disabled drilling instrumentation in the approach zones with a timing and a specificity that correlated directly with the underground formation's mapped position. All of that prior resistance had been calibrated to the capability of the drilling operation that produced it, increasing in intensity as the operation's methodology improved and decreasing in specificity as the operation's approach changed in ways that apparently required adjustment. The evacuation that this video documents occurred because the most recent drilling approach did not encounter resistance in the pattern the prior attempts had established. It encountered something different, not the familiar resistance of the formation pushing back against the approach, something that the formation did in response to the drilling reaching a specific point in the underground structure that was not resistance in any conventional sense. It was response. And the distinction between those two things is the most significant thing about what the drilling operation just reached. The drilling session that produced the response whose documentation led to the evacuation decision was not approached as a routine operational advancement of the prior approach methodology. It was approached as the most significant drilling session in the investigation's history because the instrument data from the monitoring infrastructure running continuously across the property in the weeks preceding the session had been showing changes in the underground formation's detectable characteristics that the technical team had assessed as indicating a shift in the formation's state, rather than a continuation of the escalating pattern the prior season's monitoring had established. The electromagnetic readings from the active zones above the formation had reorganized in the geographic distribution pattern that the geophysicist's assessment had characterized as consistent with a change in the source geometry of whatever was generating the surface anomalies. The vibration signatures from the underground sensors had been showing the repeating temporal structure whose mechanical precision the prior assessment had established as inconsistent with any geological process in the reference literature. And the perimeter monitoring data had been producing readings whose correspondence to the approach vector established in the prior perimeter sweep analysis indicated that whatever was operating across the broader Uinta Basin had been increasing its activity in the specific section of the property whose underground position corresponded to the drilling operation's current target. The session began with the full monitoring infrastructure running at its maximum deployment configuration, every instrument category active, every camera unit positioned, and the scientific team's full analytical attention directed at the real-time data stream from the sensors closest to the drilling operation's current approach position. The first hour of the session produced instrument readings that the technical team's field notes characterize as the most concentrated simultaneous anomaly across multiple independent measurement categories that the investigation had recorded at any prior drilling session. Not individually the most extreme readings the investigation had ever logged. Specific prior sessions had produced higher peak values in individual instrument categories. But the simultaneous elevation across every instrument category at once, in a spatial distribution that the technical team's analysis established as centered on the drilling operation's current position, was a pattern whose character was different from the escalating response pattern the prior sessions had produced. Something was paying attention to exactly where the drill was, and then the drill reached the depth that produced the response. The specific depth at which the drilling operation produced the response that led to the evacuation corresponds to the upper boundary of the primary void structure that the sonar mapping had identified as the most significant underground feature beneath the mesa, the feature whose dimensions, geometric consistency, and electromagnetic correspondence with the surface anomaly distribution had made it the primary target of the drilling operation's progressive approach across multiple seasons. What happened when the drill reached that depth is what Travis Taylor's description of the session, delivered in the specific language of a physicist whose professional discipline demands precision about what the measurements established and restraint about what they implied, characterizes as unlike anything the investigation's monitoring infrastructure had previously recorded at any depth in any prior drilling session. The electromagnetic readings across the monitoring network did not spike in the escalating resistance pattern the prior sessions had established as the formation's response to the drilling approach. They shifted simultaneously across every sensor in the network, in a coordinated pattern whose geographic distribution changed from the locally elevated distribution that the approach had been producing to a basin-wide elevation that the network's full geographic extent captured at once, every sensor simultaneously, shifting from a locally concentrated pattern to a basin-wide one in a transition whose speed the monitoring data documents as occurring between consecutive data points in the recording, present in one configuration in one data frame, present in a different configuration in the next, with no transitional period. The acoustic sensors registered the simultaneous transition in the infrasound range, a shift from the repeating temporal structure the prior monitoring had been logging to a single sustained signal whose frequency and whose internal structure the audio specialist characterized in real time as unlike anything in the prior investigation's acoustic record. The ground vibration sensors logged a signature at the target depth that was not the mechanical vibration of the drilling equipment encountering geological resistance. It was something else, something that the vibration analysis characterizes as emanating from within the void structure, rather than from the geological material surrounding it, a signature consistent with a large-scale physical event occurring inside the underground space rather than in the formation surrounding. The source of that event is inside the underground structure that the drilling operation had just reached the boundary of, and the event's occurrence in direct temporal correspondence with the drill reaching that boundary is what produced the response designation rather than the resistance designation in the investigation team's characterization of what the session documented. The 11 minutes between the drill reaching the target depth and Brandon Fugel making the evacuation decision are documented in the investigation's complete session record across every instrument category and every camera unit running at the time. What those 11 minutes contain, the specific sequence of developments in the monitoring data, the physical environment of the property, and the investigation team's direct experience of what was occurring at the session site, is the body of evidence on which the evacuation decision was based and whose character Fugel has characterized in the limited public references to the session as unlike anything in 5 seasons of investigation at the most anomalous property in American research history. The electromagnetic shift that occurred when the drill reached the target depth did not stabilize at its new basin-wide configuration. It continued changing, not returning toward the prior localized distribution but moving further from it, with the basin-wide elevation increasing in intensity across the full monitoring network in a directional movement whose rate the technical team's real-time analysis characterized as accelerating rather than approaching a new equilibrium. Whatever the drilling had triggered was not producing a one-time response and returning to its prior state. It was building. The thermal monitoring at the property surface documented a temperature anomaly that developed in the mesa zone in the minutes following the drill's depth breakthrough, an elevation in the ambient thermal environment of the mesa's surface whose magnitude and whose geographic extent the prior monitoring baseline identified as without precedent in the investigation's surface thermal thermal record, the mesa was warming. Not dramatically. The differential was measurable rather than immediately perceptible to the investigators present, but measurable across the full surface extent of the mesa formation in a pattern consistent with heat transmission from below, from something in the underground formation that had changed its thermal state in correspondence with the drilling reaching its boundary. The physical effects on the investigation team members present at the session site in the 11 minutes following the depth breakthrough are the element of the evacuation record that Fugel has been most careful about in his public references to the session. Multiple team members reported effects whose character and whose timing, corresponding directly to the onset of the electromagnetic shift and the thermal anomaly, placed them in the category of the investigation's documented physical effect events. Not dramatic, not acute in the way that prior crew medical incidents had been acute, but present, simultaneous across multiple individuals, and developing in intensity across the 11-minute window in a progression that the investigation's accumulated experience with the physical effects of the ranch's active zones gave Fugel the specific context to assess as requiring a response before the progression continued further. Brandon Fugel made the evacuation decision at the 11-minute mark of the post-breakthrough monitoring window. The decision was not made through a formal consultation process or a committee review of the session data. It was made by Fugel directly, communicated to the session team immediately, and implemented without the deliberation that decisions of comparable operational significance in the investigation's prior history had typically involved. The speed of the decision reflects something about the character of what the 11 minutes had produced in a man whose 5 seasons of sustained engagement with the most anomalous property in American research history had given him a reference framework for assessing when the investigation was operating within conditions it was equipped to manage and when it was not. Fugel's reference framework has been built across 5 seasons of decisions about how far to push the investigation in response to what the ranch produces. Decisions whose accumulated record across the broadcast seasons communicates a consistent judgment that the investigation should advance toward whatever the ranch generates rather than away from it. He has made that judgment in the face of crew medical incidents, equipment destructions, aerial encounters, and underground resistance events whose cumulative effect on the investigation's operational context has been absorbed and continued. What the 11 minutes following the drill's depth breakthrough produced in Fugel that made the evacuation decision different from every prior decision in the investigation's history is the distinction that makes the evacuation significant. The prior decisions, the decisions to keep moving in the face of everything the ranch had produced, were made in the context of a phenomenon that was producing its outputs in the investigation's vicinity, without directing them at the investigation specifically. The 11 minutes following the depth breakthrough produced something whose character the monitoring data and the direct experience of the team members present established as directed. The basin-wide electromagnetic shift, the mesothermal anomaly, the simultaneous physical effects on multiple team members, their simultaneous onset in direct correspondence with the drilling reaching the target depth, their progressive intensification across the 11-minute window, and their geographic concentration on the investigation's specific position all indicated a response whose source was aware of exactly where the drilling operation was and was producing its outputs in direct correspondence with what the drilling had done. Fugel evacuated because the investigation had produced something that was responding to it rather than simply occurring around it, and the appropriate response to a phenomenon that has demonstrated awareness of your investigation is to assess what you have documented before continuing to do the thing that produced the response. Travis Taylor's analysis of the session data from the drilling response event is the scientific foundation on which the investigation's understanding of what the 11 minutes documented is being built. And his characterization of what the analysis has produced is the most significant scientific communication about the Skinwalker Ranch investigation that has been made in the public record since his involvement with the property began. Taylor applied his full professional methodology to the session data, the systematic process of conventional explanation elimination, whose output he treats as the necessary precondition for entertaining unconventional interpretation, and whose application to the Skinwalker Ranch evidence across 5 seasons has progressively reduced the range of conventional explanations available for what the investigation's instruments have been detecting. The electromagnetic shift analysis produced the finding that Taylor has characterized in his public references to the session with the most direct language he has applied to any single piece of Skinwalker Ranch evidence across his seasons on the property. The simultaneous basin-wide reconfiguration of the electromagnetic monitoring network's readings in the interval between consecutive data points is not consistent with any electromagnetic propagation propagation mechanism in the physical literature. Electromagnetic fields do not reorganize instantaneously across geographic scales of the magnitude the session data documents. The propagation of electromagnetic effects through any medium occurs at finite velocity, at the speed of light through vacuum, at reduced velocities through conductive and lossy media. The monitoring network's geographic extent is large enough that instantaneous reconfiguration across its full span is not physically possible through any known electromagnetic mechanism. What the data shows happened is not something that known physics permits. Taylor's characterization of that finding, delivered in the restrained, precisely chosen language that his professional discipline demands, is the closest he has come in 5 seasons of public communication about the ranch's evidence to saying plainly that what the investigation's instruments documented is operating outside the known physical framework. The vibration analysis produced a complementary finding whose implication Taylor characterizes with comparable directness. The source of the vibration signature logged at the target depth is inside the underground void structure, not in the geological material at the void's boundary, inside the void. Something inside the underground space that the drilling operation reached the boundary of produced a physical event in direct temporal correspondence with the drilling reaching that boundary. The event's characteristics are documented. Its source location is established. Its correspondence with the drilling's depth breakthrough is beyond coincidence in the statistical sense. What produced it, what is inside that underground space, and why the drilling reaching its boundary produced the response the session documented, is the question that the investigation's next phase must answer. Taylor's analysis has established what the question is with more precision than any prior season's investigation has achieved. Answering it is what the evacuation bought time to prepare for. The evacuation is not a conclusion. Fugel has been explicit. The investigation has not stopped, the property has not been abandoned, and the drilling operation has not been terminated. What the evacuation produced is a pause whose purpose is the development of a revised operational framework that reflects what the session established about the nature of what the underground formation does when the drilling reaches its primary boundary. The prior framework was designed around a formation that resisted. The new framework must be designed around a formation that responds. Those are different operational challenges. The response profile the session documented, the instantaneous basin-wide electromagnetic reconfiguration, the simultaneous mesothermal output, the concurrent physical effects on multiple team members, constitutes a detailed picture of what the formation produces when its boundary is reached. The boundary penetration that comes next will be the most significant single operational decision in the investigation's history. What happens when the drilling enters the interior of the underground space is unknown. The evacuation bought time to prepare for that unknown, with the full weight of what the session established about what is waiting on the other side. 5 seasons of Skinwalker Ranch investigation documented a phenomenon that resisted. Resistance is passive, the phenomenon declining to be reached. What the drilling session documented is not resistance. It is response, active, directed, calibrated to the specific action that produced it, and produced at a scale the prior resistance events never approached. The distinction matters more than anything the investigation has previously established. A phenomenon that resists can be mapped and progressively understood. A phenomenon that responds has demonstrated awareness specific enough to produce directed output in correspondence with a specific action at a specific location. Whatever is inside the underground formation knows the drilling reached its boundary. It responded to prove it. The evacuation is the investigation's acknowledgement of what that demonstration means. The drilling that goes back into the ground will go back knowing that what is on the other side of the boundary knows it is coming. That knowledge is the most significant thing 5 seasons of Skinwalker Ranch investigation has ever produced. And what the drilling finds when it crosses the boundary with that knowledge is what every prior season has been building toward.